Yes, everybody, it's June 13th. Happy Friday the 13th out there. That's a special happy birthday to the big boy himself, Jason Voorhees. It's your boy NornRad89 here, bringing you another video today, y'all. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the early years of Friday the 13th. That means we're going to be talking about my love and admiration for the franchise as a whole in general, but also discussing more in specific Friday the 13th, the first film, then Friday the 13th Part 2, and as well Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. So we're going to talk about these three films and, like I said, really how this franchise got me obsessed with horror and really just wanting to clamor for more and more. So let's discuss this. Roll it. So if you're a stranger to the channel or you're new to the channel, yes, Friday the 13th is my favorite horror franchise, and today we're going to discuss the early years, going all the way back to the original film from 1980. This was not really supposed to be a franchise at all when Sean S. Cunningham started this film and wanted to do Friday the 13th. This was just kind of almost like a cash grab film, just really wanted to do the movie to recoup some money real quick so he can put it back into a television series that he wanted to do, but this film blew up and did so well in the box office that they had to do sequels and just keep pumping them out. And this first film is iconic. I could remember calling back to me as a kid, reaching back into the recesses of my mind, remembering that I probably saw this the first time on like a Monster Fest or a Fear Fest on AMC during the October season. They would typically pick a day where they would just do all the Friday the 13th films, whichever ones they had the rights to. They would put those ones out on TV and show them, and I just wanted to watch this franchise, and I started binging them, and I think it was with my grandpa. My mom would work graveyard, so I would hang out with my grandpa or my aunt sometimes, and watching him with my grandpa, just binging and staying up all day, Friday the 13th, it was a really fun marathon. And some main reasons why I love this first film so much is it's such a cozy, comforting watch. It introduced me to the slasher subgenre, really, and got me immersed into it. It wasn't the first horror franchise that I saw, but it's the one that really got me introduced to the tropes and really used to what a slasher film was supposed to be like. And also the camp setting. I'm such a sucker for the camp setting. And I also must speak about the music by Harry Manfredini, which is iconic. In the best way I can describe the music as sometimes when I'm watching Friday the 13th films, it kind of feels very Scooby-Doo-ish, but I mean that in the best way when you're watching the gang of Scooby-Doo running around, getting chased by one of their villains and stuff like that, and you hear the music just getting you pumped up. That's how the music is in the Friday the 13th films, and that's a very, very important part of movies in general. And Friday the 13th, like I said, has some really iconic scores in the franchise. Another thing is I could remember still being as a child being thrown for a loop because I thought Steve Christie was going to be the antagonist. I thought he was going to be the villain in this film. Come to find out in our third act, spoiler alert, I know, spoiler warning, it's Mama Voorhees, Jason Voorhees' mom, is the killer in this film. And I think that, like I said, threw me for a loop as a child because there's still hints in this film where they drop little Easter eggs and nuggets where it could possibly be Steve Christie. Like, for example, he drives a very similar colored Jeep and car to Mama Voorhees when she's driving around, and you end up seeing her pick up Annie like moments later. They have the same car, I believe, so they do drop little hints that it could possibly be him. And still to this day, I remember seeing that ending and just being blown away and loving it because Betsy Palmer knocks it out of the park. Now on to Friday the 13th Part 2, because like I said, Friday the 13th was so popular that they demanded sequels. They wanted more. They needed more money, Paramount. I love you, Paramount. But like I said, they wanted more. Friday the 13th Part 2 came out and they upped the ante in just about every way in terms of kill count, in terms of graphic nature, practical effects, and also having Jason Voorhees in there. We get our first look at Jason as an actual character when it comes to the sackhead Jason. Yes, he was in the end of Friday the 13th, but that was kind of a nightmare sequence for Alice's character as an actual character. And coming back for revenge in this film, we get to see Sackhead version of Jason Voorhees. Admittedly, not my favorite version of Jason Voorhees when it comes to looks, but in terms of the film, I can't argue anyone that has this one very high up because it is a lot of iconic moments. First of all, we have Ginny in here, which is probably one of the most famous final girls in the Friday the 13th franchise. We have a very good third act in this film, and like I said, in terms of Friday the 13th, comparing it to this film, it ups the ante in just about every way, which is what you want from a sequel. But for me, being a lover of this franchise and what I adore about this franchise is I love nostalgia. I'm such an originator when it comes to this franchise, and I think this film is just such a cozy watch. Some of the best moments of the Friday the 13th film, this first film, is that it's just moments where the characters are just talking or being real or bickering with each other. I find those moments to be some of the most authentic and raw moments of the film. That's not to say Friday the 13th Part 2 doesn't have those moments in it. It's just as I've gotten older, I've grown more to loving this film. But yeah, Friday the 13th Part 2 is still a really good film, and in terms of the franchise, we are firing on all cylinders. So continuing with the early years now, we are on to Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. Yes, one of my all-time favorites. This one calls close to home and is near dear close to my heart. This is my second favorite in the franchise. One big reason is Chris Higgins. I think is one of my favorite final girls, easily the most underrated final girl, I think, in the Friday the 13th franchise. I love Chris's character. Also, this film, I give a lot of props to Friday the 13th Part 3 because it takes mostly place during the daytime. It takes place during day, which Friday the 13th Part 1 and 2 have a lot of nighttime sequences. I would say 70% of this film takes place during the daytime, and it's still just as creepy and just as scary. That does a lot of fact is akin to right here, Richard Broker. We got to attribute it to him because he has such a fantastic Jason Voorhees performance that is creepy, scary, and menacing. So a lot of that is because of him. But yeah, I think Friday the 13th Part 3 3D is just one of my favorites. It will always be one of my favorites, and returning to this film, I love it because it actually uses the 3D gimmick to its advantage. There's a lot of cool kills in this film. One specific one I must say that doesn't really, the 3D gimmick doesn't help it. It's the head crunch kill, but all the other ones besides that, the harpoon kill, the upside down handstand kill, which is one of my favorites, I think Friday the 13th Part 3 knocks it out of the park in a lot of areas, and the Harry Manfredini score might be one of my favorites in this one. So you can see from my glowing recommendations and talking about these first three films that Friday the 13th, the early years, we are loving it. It's so fantastic. These are some of the greatest years of the Friday the 13th franchise and some of the best years to return to because there's just a lot of nostalgia vibes. Like I said, they're so old school. They have that great slasher vibe, the camp setting and everything, and such introductions to a lot of things. Like I said, we get Mama Voorhees and the origin of the story. We get the first look at Jason Voorhees in here, even though it's not the traditional look. Then we eventually get the hockey mask, which is the most iconic and most traditional look of Jason Voorhees and would permeate pop culture for many, many years and decades. So that's another reason why I love the Friday the 13th franchise, is because even though there's people who haven't seen these movies or watched these films or seen the franchise at all, they know of Jason Voorhees. They know of the character, they know what he looks like, and they know the story because it's such a part of pop culture. And for me, Friday the 13th will always be one of those iconic films I love returning to this franchise because it reminds me of that time of being obsessed with watching horror films and marathons on TV, but also going to Hollywood Video or Video Update and just renting movies over and over and over and sharing them with my family and my friends. But I hope you all enjoyed this video for Friday the 13th. Happy Friday the 13th out there. Please do your boy Norin a favor and enjoy some Friday the 13th content today. But also like the video. That greatly helps out the channel. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and have that notification bell poked so you're notified anytime I drop a video. But most importantly, I want you all to have a safe and happy day. Peace out.